We are living in a profound state of collective amnesia. Every single day, we participate in a global game that leaves the vast majority of us stressed, isolated, and spiritually hollow, yet we treat this arrangement as if it were as natural as the weather or the rotation of the earth. We have accepted a system that systematically drains the many to enrich the few, and we've been told so often that there is no alternative that we've stopped looking for the exit. To understand why your life feels like an endless treadmill of work and consumption, we have to look at the historical architecture of this trap. Capitalism didn't just appear, it was constructed through a series of brutal maneuvers that forced humanity into a very specific and very restricted way of living. Before we dive into the history, let's look at the 3 things you do every day that, upon objective reflection, make absolutely no sense. First, you spend the overwhelming majority of your conscious life working for someone else's benefit. For most people, the 40 to 60 hour work week means you spend more time with coworkers you might not even like than with your own children, spouse, or community. Second, you are caught in a cycle of compulsive consumption. You trade your life force, your time, for money, and then immediately trade that money for products designed with planned obsolescence. You are buying things that are engineered to break so that you are forced back into the cycle to buy them again. Third, the system has structured your entire social reality around competition. You aren't just living, you're competing with your neighbors for status, competing with your colleagues for housing, and competing with your peers for a sense of worth. We have sacrificed community for a rat race that offers no finish line. For most of human history, the idea of selling your labor was a foreign concept. In feudal and tributary systems, people worked for themselves or for a lord in exchange for protection and land. Life was centered on tradition and communal obligation. So, how do we get from stable, land-based communities to overcrowded cities and wage slavery? The catalyst was a tragedy. In the 1300s, the Black Death wiped out roughly 1/3 of Europe's population. Suddenly, labor was scarce and the surviving peasants had leverage. They could demand better lives. The ruling class, the lords, and the emerging merchant elite panicked. They needed a way to reassert control and maximize profit. Their solution was enclosure. For centuries, the commons, forests, pastures, and fields were shared by everyone. People could graze their animals and grow their food. The elite began fencing off these commons, turning them into private property for sheep farming because wool was more profitable than people. This created a massive, desperate population of landless peasants. With no land to grow food, they were faced with a binary choice: work in the new urban factories for whatever wage was offered, or starve. The capitalists didn't just offer jobs, they created a system of total dependency. By making the alternative to wage labor literal death, they ensured a compliant, desperate workforce. As the joint stock company emerged under the protection of the state, capitalism developed 3 core traits that govern our world today: ruthless efficiency, hyper-competition, and the mandate of infinite growth. Efficiency in this context is just a polite word for cost-cutting. It means paying the worker as little as possible while extracting as much effort as possible. Competition means that if a capitalist isn't constantly beating their rivals, they go bankrupt. There is no room for ethics or the concept of having enough. Accumulation is the most dangerous trait. Capitalism requires infinite growth on a finite planet. It can never be satisfied. It must always find new markets to colonize, new resources to strip, and new populations to exploit. This model is inherently unstable. It creates enormous wealth but concentrates it at the very top. Statistics show that today, the wealthiest 1% own more than 50% of the world's wealth. This isn't a glitch, it's the design. In the late 1800s, the factory conditions were so horrific, with children working 16-hour days and life expectancy plummeting, that the workers began to organize. The workers' movements threatened to overthrow the entire structure. To save themselves, the capitalist class made a bargain with the state. They created a social contract. They gave workers limited voting rights, basic safety protections, and slightly better wages. This wasn't done out of kindness. It was a strategic move to give the worker just enough of a stake in the system to prevent a total revolt. If you have a small house and a television to lose, you are much less likely to join a revolution. They bolstered this with the American dream or the myth of meritocracy. The narrative says that anyone can get rich if they work hard enough. This shifts the blame from the system to the individual. If you're poor after working 3 jobs for 40 years, the system tells you it's your fault, you just didn't hustle hard enough. We defend billionaires because we've been taught to believe that we might be one of them someday. As capitalism saturated domestic markets, it expanded globally. While formal colonialism ended, it was replaced by a more subtle financial empire. Wealthy nations and multinational corporations extracted resources from the developing world by creating a lopsided deal. They would buy raw materials for $1 and sell back manufactured goods for $1,000. When poor countries tried to develop their own industries, the capitalist powers used the World Bank, the IMF, and the WTO to force them to open their markets and stay dependent. They co-opted the local elites in Africa, Asia, and Latin America. They told these leaders, help us extract the wealth of your country, and we will make you personally rich. We will hide your money in Swiss banks and let you buy real estate in London or New York. This created a global system where the best and brightest in poor countries are incentivized to betray their own people for a chance to join the global elite. If a country tried to choose a different path, like socialism or independent development, the military and economic coercion of the capitalist bloc would crush them through sanctions, coups, or direct invasion. Today, we are reaching the limit of this game. We are facing 3 unsolvable contradictions. First, ecological collapse. You cannot have infinite growth on a planet with finite resources. We are literally destroying the conditions that sustain human life for the sake of quarterly profit reports. Second, wealth concentration. System is hollowing itself out. If the bottom 50% can barely afford to survive, they cannot buy the products the system produces. Third, social breakdown. We are more connected than ever, yet more atomized and depressed. We have traded community and purpose for a screen and a credit card. The system is defended by a powerful psychological shield, the belief that this is just the best we can do. But the happiest societies on earth are not the ones with the most billionaires. They are the ones with the strongest social safety nets, the most meaningful work, and the best work-life balance. We play this destructive game because we are trapped in short-termism. For a few decades, capitalism generated massive wealth for the top, but the long-term cost is the degradation of human life and the planet. It is a race to the bottom where countries compete to see who can lower wages and environmental protections the fastest to attract investment. We are at a crossroads. The current model is mathematically and ecologically unsustainable. The system contains the seeds of its own destruction, and as the crises mount, we have to stop asking how to fix capitalism and start asking what comes after it. The game is failing. It's time to stop pretending it's the only one in town. Are you ready to imagine a world where life is valued more than profit? The first step is realizing that the prison walls are made of ideas, and ideas can be changed. Consider the way your day is structured. You wake up to an alarm, a tool designed during the Industrial Revolution to synchronize human biology with factory machinery. You commute to a workplace where you often lack any democratic say in how the organization is run. You perform tasks that frequently feel divorced from any real-world benefit, and then you return home too exhausted to engage in hobbies, community service, or deep relationships. This is the reality for billions, and we are told this is the pinnacle of human progress. The mental cage of consumerism is perhaps the most effective form of social control ever devised. It operates on the principle of manufactured lack. Advertisements are not designed to tell you about a product. They are designed to tell you that you are incomplete without it. They sell you the promise of status, beauty, or belonging, and for a fleeting moment after the purchase, you feel a hit of dopamine. But the high fades and the system is ready with the next object to fill the void. This cycle keeps the economy moving, but it keeps the individual in a state of perpetual inadequacy. We have become a society of hunters and gatherers, but instead of hunting for sustenance, we hunt for symbols of success. We gather things to show the world that we have made it, even as we feel increasingly lost on the inside. This obsession with things is a direct consequence of the loss of the commons. When we lost our shared land, we lost our shared identity. We became individuals in a marketplace rather than members of a community. The system encourages this isolation because an isolated person is an ideal consumer. If you don't have a community to rely on, you have to buy everything you need. If you don't have a sense of purpose, you have to buy objects that give you a temporary sense of meaning. Consumerism is the filler we use to plug the holes left by the destruction of traditional social structures. But it is a leaky plug. No matter how much we buy, the water keeps rising. Image showing the rise in global waste compared to the rise in GDP. The global financial system acts as the enforcer of this reality. Debt is the chain that keeps the worker tied to the factory. In the past, people were kept in place by physical walls or legal decrees. Today, they are kept in place by mortgages, student loans, and credit card balances. When you are in debt, you lose the freedom to say no. You cannot quit a soul-crushing job. You cannot take a year off to travel or study. You cannot risk starting a new venture that might fail. Debt makes you a servant to the future. You are spending your tomorrow to pay for your yesterday. This ensures that the labor force remains stable and compliant, regardless of how much they dislike the work they are doing. It is a form of soft slavery that is far more efficient than the hard slavery of the past because the individual believes they chose it. We must also confront the environmental cost of this endless accumulation. Our economic model is a suicide pact. We treat the earth as a giant warehouse of resources and a giant trash can for our waste. We calculate GDP by looking at how much stuff we produce and sell, but we never subtract the cost of the forest destroyed, the oceans polluted, or the species driven to extinction. A forest is worth nothing to our current system while it is standing. It only gains value once it is cut down and turned into lumber. This is a form of madness. We are eating our own house to keep the fire going, and we are surprised when the roof starts to collapse. The system's need for growth is in direct conflict with the Earth's need for balance. The inequality we see today is not an accident of history. It is the logical conclusion of a system that rewards the ownership of capital over the performance of labor. If you have $1 million, the system makes it very easy for you to turn it into 2 million. If you have nothing, the system makes it nearly impossible for you to get your first 1,000. This is why we see the emergence of a global neo-feudalism, where a tiny class of tech billionaires and financial moguls own more than entire nations. They control the platforms we use to communicate, the data that defines our identities, and the political processes that govern our lives. We have traded the old kings for new ones, but the fundamental dynamic of extraction remains the same. The way out starts with a rejection of the system's core values. We must stop measuring our worth by our wealth and start measuring it by our contribution to the well-being of others and the health of the planet. We must reclaim the commons, not just in terms of land, but in terms of our digital spaces, our knowledge, and our communities. We need to move from a model of competition to a model of cooperation. This is not a utopian dream. It is a survival necessity. Throughout history, humans have thrived because of our ability to work together for a common goal. Capitalism is a brief and destructive detour from that long-term human strategy. Reclaiming our lives means reclaiming our time. We need to fight for shorter work weeks, for a universal basic income that decouples survival from wage labor, and for the right to rest. We need to rediscover the joy of making things for ourselves rather than buying them, of sharing resources rather than hoarding them, and of finding meaning in service rather than status. The system tells you that you are a consumer first and a human second. It is time to reverse that order. The cracks in the capitalist structure are widening every day. From the increasing frequency of financial crises to the growing movements for climate justice and workers' rights, people are starting to wake up. The transition to what comes next will be difficult and messy, but it is already beginning. It begins every time someone chooses a local cooperative over a global corporation. It begins every time a community organizes to protect its environment. It begins every time an individual decides that they have enough and stops running on the treadmill. We are the architects of the future, and we are currently living in a house that is on fire. It is time to stop trying to repair the floorboards and start building a new home. The game of consumerism has made our lives miserable because it was never meant to make us happy. It was only meant to make us productive. But we are more than tools for profit. We are living, breathing, dreaming beings with a deep need for connection and a profound capacity for creativity. The world after capitalism is waiting for us to build it. Let us look deeper into the concept of ideological hegemony, the way the system controls not just what we do, but what we think is possible. This is the ultimate victory of any power structure. When the oppressed begin to speak the language of the oppressor, the revolution is effectively dead. We see this when workers argue against their own benefits because they believe it will harm the economy. We see it when people defend the rights of corporations over the rights of human beings. We have been trained to see the world through the eyes of the capitalist. We worry about the stock market even when we own no stocks. We worry about corporate tax rates while we struggle to pay our own rent. This is a form of psychological capture that makes us the guardians of our own prison. Breaking this hegemony requires a radical re-education. We need to study the histories that have been erased, the stories of successful communal societies, the histories of resistance, and the theories of alternative economic models. We need to understand that the current world is just one of many possible worlds. The system tries to present itself as the end of history, the final and perfect form of human organization. But history never ends. Systems rise and fall based on their ability to meet the needs of the people. When a system fails to provide security, meaning, and a future for the majority, its legitimacy begins to dissolve. We are in that period of dissolution right now. The sense of misery that permeates modern life, the anomie and the alienation described by sociologists, is a signal. It is the human spirit's allergic reaction to an environment that treats people as disposable inputs. We were not meant to live in silos, competing for scraps while a few individuals hoard the feast. We were meant to live in the solidarity of the group. The return to this solidarity is the only antidote to the isolation of consumerism. This means building mutual aid networks, participating in local politics, and creating spaces where people are valued for who they are, not what they can produce. In the global south, the struggle is even more direct. For centuries, these nations have been the engines of Western prosperity, providing the raw materials and the cheap labor that fuel our consumption. The modern green transition in the West often relies on a new wave of extraction in the South, mining lithium and cobalt under horrific conditions to power our electric cars and smartphones. This is just the latest chapter in a long history of unequal exchange. A truly sustainable future must be a global one. We cannot build a paradise in the West on the back of a graveyard in the South. The fight against consumerism is a fight for global justice. Image showing the global distribution of lithium and cobalt reserves. As we look toward the future, we see the potential for a post-scarcity world. With modern technology, we have the ability to provide for the basic needs of every human on Earth with a fraction of the labor currently required. The problem is not a lack of resources. The problem is the way those resources are distributed. Automation should be a blessing that frees us from drudgery, but under capitalism, it is a curse that threatens our survival. We need a system where the benefits of technology are shared by everyone, not just the owners of the machines. We need to move from a logic of scarcity to a logic of abundance. This shift requires us to redefine wealth. Real wealth is not a large bank account. Real wealth is clean air, fertile soil, a vibrant community, and the time to enjoy them. Real wealth is the health of our bodies and the peace of our minds. The capitalist system has stolen our real wealth and replaced it with plastic tokens. It is time to trade them back. It is time to stop being consumers and start being citizens of the earth. The game is still being played, but the players are getting tired. The illusions are wearing thin. The promise of happiness through buying is ringing hollow. We are standing at the threshold of a new era. What comes next depends on our ability to imagine it and our courage to fight for it. The system is not invincible. It is just a set of ideas that we have agreed to follow. We can withdraw our consent. We can walk away from the treadmill. We can start living for each other instead of for the machine. The journey will be long and the resistance will be strong, but but the reward is nothing less than our own lives. Think about the concept of unhappy productivity. We are producing more than at any point in history, yet our levels of life satisfaction are declining. We are working more efficiently, yet we have less free time. This is the great irony of the industrial and digital ages. The tools that were supposed to liberate us have been used to tighten the grip of the market on our every waking moment. We are productive for the system, but impoverished in our souls. This is the core of the consumerist misery. We have gained the world but lost our connection to it. The system relies on planned dissatisfaction. To keep you buying, it must keep you wanting. It must create new fashions, new models, and new trends that make your current possessions feel obsolete. It must make you feel that you are falling behind if you don't have the latest version of everything. This is a psychological treadmill that has no end. The moment you step off, you realize that you didn't need any of it. You realize that the need was an artificial creation of the marketing department. We also see the impact on our relationships. When everything is a commodity, even people begin to be seen as products. We market ourselves on dating apps. We curate our lives on social media. We invest in people based on what they can do for us. The logic of the market has invaded our most intimate spaces. We have lost the ability to relate to each other in a way that is not transactional. Reclaiming our misery means reclaiming the non-transactional parts of life, the acts of kindness that have no price tag, the moments of connection that produce no profit, and the love that seeks nothing in return. The institutions of global capitalism, the World Bank, the IMF, the WTO, are the modern equivalent of the colonial offices. They enforce a set of rules that ensure the continued flow of wealth from the poor to the rich. They use debt as a weapon to force countries to privatize their public services, cut their social spending, and open their resources to foreign exploitation. This neoliberalism has been a disaster for the majority of the world's population, leading to increased poverty, instability, and environmental destruction. But it has been a huge success for the global elite. The fight against consumerism must also be a fight against these institutions of global control. We are at a moment of organic crisis, where the old system is dying, but the new one is not yet born. In this interregnum, we see the rise of many dangerous symptoms: the return of authoritarianism, the increase in xenophobia, and the spread of conspiracy theories. These are all signs of a society that has lost its way and is searching for a scapegoat. The only way to combat these symptoms is to provide a real alternative, a vision of a future that is inclusive, sustainable, and just. We must provide a reason for hope that is grounded in reality, not in the empty promises of the market. The Washington consensus that has governed the world since the end of the Cold War is finally crumbling. The belief that free markets and liberal democracy would solve all our problems has been proven wrong. Markets are not free, they are rigged. And democracy is not liberal when it is bought and sold by the highest bidder. We need a new global consensus based on human rights, ecological limits, and social equity. This is the great task of the 21st century. As you listen to these words, think about your own life. Where are the places where the system has captured you? What are the things you buy out of habit or fear rather than need? Who are the people in your community you can reach out to? The revolution is not just a future event. It is a series of small daily actions. It is a change in perspective. It is a decision to live differently. The misery of consumerism is a heavy burden, but we don't have to carry it. We can set it down. We can walk toward the light of a new possibility. The game is over. It's time to start living. Reflect on the idea of commodity fetishism, where we attribute magical powers to the things we buy. We think a certain pair of shoes will make us more athletic, or a certain car will make us more successful, or a certain phone will make us more connected. We lose sight of the human labor and the environmental destruction that went into making those objects. We see only the brand. Reclaiming our lives means looking behind the brand. It means seeing the hands that made the product and the land that provided the materials. It means making the invisible visible again. When we see the world as it truly is, the glamour of consumerism disappears. We see a system of organized waste and systematic exploitation We see a world that is being sacrificed for the sake of an abstract number called profit. This realization is painful, but it is also liberating. It frees us from the desire for the tokens of the system. It allows us to focus on the things that actually matter. It allows us to become the authors of our own stories rather than the characters in a marketing plan. The end of the capitalist era will not be the end of human progress. It will be the beginning of it. For the first time, we will be able to direct our collective energy toward the problems that actually matter. Healing the planet, ending poverty, exploring the universe, and understanding the mystery of our own consciousness. We have so much potential, but we are currently using it to find better ways to sell each other things we don't need. It is a colossal waste of human genius. Let us imagine a city built for people, not for cars and commerce. A city with plenty of public spaces, with free and efficient transportation, with communal kitchens and gardens, and with housing that is a right, not a commodity. A city where the air is clean and the streets are safe. This city is possible. We have the technology and the resources to build it. The only thing we lack is the political will and the collective imagination. But imagination is a muscle that grows with use. Let us start using it today. We are the descendants of survivors, explorers, and revolutionaries. We have faced crises before, and we have overcome them. The crisis of capitalism is just the latest challenge in the long human journey. We have the knowledge, the tools, and the connection to build something better. The misery of consumerism is just a symptom of a world that is out of balance. We are the ones who can bring it back into equilibrium. The story of humanity is not a story of competition and consumption. It is a story of resilience, creativity, and love. Let us write the next chapter together. The treadmill is slowing down. The lights in the shopping mall are flickering. The world you were told was inevitable is starting to look very fragile. This is not a time for fear. It is a time for preparation. It is a time to build the foundations of the new world within the shell of the old. It is a time to connect, to learn, and to dream. The game of consumerism made our lives miserable, but the game is coming to an end. A new day is dawning. Can you feel it? As the audio ends, don't just go back to your routine. Take a moment of silence. Look at the objects in your room and ask yourself what they actually cost, not in money, but in life and in the health of the planet. Then look out the window at the world and realize that it is still there, waiting for you to reclaim it. The future is not a destination, it is a direction. Start walking. Would you like me to dive deeper into how specific historical events like the Industrial Revolution or the rise of neoliberalism directly shaped our current consumption habits?